Okay, Leigh Slater, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Yep.
Now, Leigh, you've got an incredible story for us today. You've been keeping a colony, an apiary of the English black bee for 63 years. It's an incredible story. I heard about it for the first time about 3 or 4 weeks ago from a mate of mine, Matthew Crane. He said, have you heard about this, the black bee in Tasmania? And I said, no, I haven't. And I asked about it on the Tasmanian beekeeping forums, and no one else had either. So it's a very well kept secret and an incredible story. So do you want to tell us that story today, Leigh?
Yes. I started beekeeping when I was 12 years old. I got my first swarm of bees when I was 12, and little did I know there was a rare strain of bee, because this type of bee was fairly common in the high altitudes area like Tarraleah and places like that. They was just ordinary bees to me, and of course as I kept bees I built them up, and I suppose I had about 20 hives of these bees as a boy. And the law those days was that you should have them registered. So I approached the local policeman there and asked him about the registration. He said, yes, it's compulsory. So I got them registered. And, of course, in turn, the present apiary officer at that time in Tasmania was Don Cunningham. And he got in touch with me to come up and do a visit at these bees, and of course he came up and I met him there, and we looked at the bees, and he was fairly impressed with them. So I kept them as good as I could in patent hives, and of course after he sort of finished looking at the bees, he said to me, I can't get over how quiet they are. He said normally the black strain of bee is fairly aggressive. He said, but these seem to be so quiet. And of course, Tarraleah was an isolated area in the mountains of Tasmania. And of course, the strain has kept pure. Well, it was pure those days. And of course, no other foreign strains had mingled with the black strain. Anyway, he was so impressed with them, he came up a few times and looked at them again as well, and he said, I'd like to write to people through a couple of scientists. Anyway, he got in touch with a chappie by the name of Professor Yule, and who was, I think he was German, and Professor Ruttner, and I think he was American. And they exchanged notes, and they were fairly impressed by the locality of them and the quietness of the strain. And so, in turn, Don Cunningham came and got samples of these bees and sent them back to these scientists. And pardon me, and they do wing measurements to check on the purity of them. And of course, they came up trumps. And of course, in turn, these chappies came out and had a look at the bees as well. And of course, the Sydney University got involved, and of course, they thought, well, maybe they should do something to try and protect the strain in the area. So they declared a reserve in the central part of Tasmania for these black bees.
Now, Leigh, can you tell us what year this is?
Well, I think it must have been around about back in the late 60s, early 70s, at a guess. And of course, things rolled on from there. So the government see fit to draw up a boundary for these black bees. And where I actually have them wasn't sort of a good honey producing area like for commercial beekeepers. So there wasn't much sort of friction caused by the government actually declaring it a reserve with Don Cunningham's help, and of course it rolled on from there. So,
So this reserve, what kind of size are we talking here?
Well, I can't honestly tell you. I've been looking for the maps, but I can't tell you. But it's quite a big area. I could explain it by explaining landmarks and things like that for you, if you want me to do that. Yeah,
that'd be great. I've actually got a copy of the map, and I'll send it to you after this. A friend of mine sent it to me.
Thank you. Yeah, so it sort of runs. It follows the high crest of the mountains on the western side of the Dune up to Lake King William, and then it deviates across, just from memory, across to the Lower Highway, and then it sort of comes back down through the Dee Lagoon area, part of the Dee Lagoon area, around via Brady's Lake, and of course down through to not far from Waiatina, where I live now, and it's the centre part, pretty well, of the Tasmania. So that was declared the reserve for the Old English black bee.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's a very large area. For listeners who are not familiar with the area, a very, very big area.
It is. It was mainly timbered, and of course, since the late 60s and 70s, the government see fit to wood chip, to create wood chipping, and of course, it's happened here on the reserve, and of course, they've taken a lot of wood chip timber away from the reserve now, and of course, when they take it away, they plant pine trees, whereas before it was forested with large swamp gums and man ferns. So it was pristine forest. But of course, now with the wood chipping, it's sort of opened it up a bit. But there's still pure strains of bees in the area, and I've still got pure strains of bees.
Really fantastic. And is it so? Tell us the part about how people came over from England and took samples of it back to England to repopulate the area over there.
Yeah, well, that's another story. Now, Don got inquiries from a beekeeper in England to try and establish the black strain back there because they'd lost the strain there. And, of course, in turn, we bred queen bees and actually sent them back to England to this beekeeper. And I think he had fairly good success with them. I don't know whether they're still going now. I shouldn't think so, probably. But, yes, we did send queen bees back to England. I reckon I'm the first Tasmanian to ever export queen bees to England anyway. But that was all done through the Agricultural Department and care of Don Cunningham, which was the local apiary inspector.
Mm-hmm. And for listeners just here, just a bit of background. In the early 1900s, there was a disease called the Isle of Wight disease that went through England and wiped out most of the native Apis mellifera, and most people in England who were keeping bees at the time actually replaced their colonies with Italian bees. So there was a time in which there was not many native black bees in England. So Leigh's efforts here were really good in helping them re-establish that population.
Yes, I didn't know about the disease, but yes, that sort of fits in, doesn't it? So, so anyway, a little bit of history was made there. And of course, I've still kept. I ended up with about 80 hives of the black bees, and of course they're very labour intensive. All they want to do is in the summertime or springtime is build up. They build up nice and strong. You think you're going to get a crop of honey off them, and then they'll cast a swarm. And I've known some of those hives to actually cast swarms up to 4 and 5 times. And even while I've been removing queen cells and moving along the rows of the bees, doing inspections and removing cells, I've looked behind me to the hives I've just done, and out they come with a swarm. So it was hopeless trying to keep them in strong stead for a honey flow. They just naturally wanted to swarm, even though wintertime they wintered well. They would form a cluster in the centre of the hive, and they wouldn't eat much of their stores either. I think that's just the breed of the Old English black bee. They pretty well live on nothing, and they survive, and they can survive pretty severe winters. Of course, we used to get snow at Tarraleah, And on different occasions, I've seen 7 and 8 inches of snow on top of the lids. So they are fairly hardy.
Yeah, the swarming thing is very interesting. I've got a mate in Ireland, Terry Meakin. I've just did a podcast with him a couple of weeks ago, and he said he works with the Irish black bee. So, and he said one of the biggest issues that he has is again swarming. So, and I sent him a picture of my Caucasians that I use, and they won't swarm almost ever. Even if they're honeybound, it's very, very different.
Yes.
But that's an incredible story, and so you're currently still keeping them. And but apart from swarming, what do you think some other differences? What are some other differences that you'd find between them and say the Italian bees, which I know you also have some hives of Italian bees?
Yes. Well, I meant to say they're lousy housekeepers. That they're prone to picking up any sort of disease, and you've got to inspect the brood fairly regular and things like that. And I noticed even chalk brood, which we've got here in Tasmania, they'll seal it over rather than drag it out. So they're not real good housekeepers, the black bees. But other than that, they seem to survive. Mm-hmm. Yes.
And do you know? So this program was set up in the early 70s by the Tasmanian government to protect the bees. Do you know where that program's at the moment?
Look, I haven't heard anything from the government since more or less, I suppose, Harold Ayton. Don Cunningham was the senior apiary officer, and of course Harold Ayton was the inspector after Harold retired. And after Harold died, well, I virtually haven't heard from anybody with any assistance or any help to keep the strain going. Go on.
So how long do you think it's been since you've heard from the government regarding this program?
50 years.
Wow.
I don't think they consider it as being very important in the beekeeping fraternity. But it's just another one of the things that they've got. But yes, it's pretty sad, really, I suppose. Even though the Tasmanian Beekeepers Association helped me in doing a queen breeding course, which I did with a commercial beekeeper, and I did a week-long course with him at his residence, at his apiary, and I learned how to rare queens, and of course that's another trade on its own, really, isn't it? Rare and queen bee. So I was grateful for the Tasmanian beekeepers to assist me, and that goes back in the, I suppose, early 70s that I was able to do that course, and I've benefited a lot from it as well. So that's helped me with trying to keep the strain pure. But it's nice to be able to graft a lovely black queen and things like that. But of course, they're a lot of work. They're a lot of work when you really look into it. They're nearly a job of their own without the Italian queen bees. Italian bees. They're hard to look after. But anyway, that's the way it goes. Yeah.
Well, I guess I want to say thanks. Thanks for the great job that you've done over the last 63 years in maintaining this line of bees.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, you've done an excellent job.
Yeah, we'll see.
And what a great story.
Yeah, well, as I say, I started off at 12 years old, and I worked in Dad's butcher shop after school to actually get pocket money to buy bee equipment. And of course, when he used to order his greaseproof paper and brown paper to wrap the meat in from Walsh's in Hobart, they were agents for Pender Brothers, and they sold beekeeping equipment there. And of course, nothing suited me more than to save up my dollars or my pounds those days. And when it came time to purchase these, I'd say to Dad, listen, I've saved up £10. And he'd say, I don't owe you that. But when I showed him the record in the docker book where I'd put it down after saving 10 shillings a week out of a £1 note, he had to sort of bite the bullet. And I used to get my beekeeping equipment up when he got his paper from Hobart.
Oh, that's great.
Here's the story.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I've got a mate in New Zealand, John Berry, and he was telling me a story that his grandfather, so this is the Arateki honey family, is a fairly big honey family in New Zealand. Yes. So his grandfather, who started the business, was working in a meat packing facility in a butcher's, like a very big commercial butchery. And he made all of his first beehives out of the offcuts from the crates that they were using to box up all the meat.
There you go.
So, yeah, that's good. Another interesting butcher story.
Yes, exactly.
Now, while I've got you there, Leigh,
Yes.
it would be great if you could tell us a little bit about what it's like working with leatherwood honey, because you're about to go to Leatherwood.
Yes, well, you can get leatherwood on the lower reaches of the Gordon Road, and when if you've got leatherwood sites lower down in the leatherwood country, you can normally get 2 to 3 crops of honey off them. And, of course, higher altitudes, you only get 1 take. So most of the leatherwood sites that I've got are high altitude leatherwood sites. And, of course, I only get 1 take off those sites. But I'll probably take off between 4 and 5 ideals of leatherwood honey off each hive. And that's my take for the summer. And I normally leave them there to fill up the lower boxes while they're there to get them through the winter, which is I normally leave an extra box of honey on them. So that's 4 ideals high just for the winter. And any surplus I take off the top. But and I don't shake the bees off the combs. I lift 2 boxes of honey and put a bee escapes underneath them. And come back the next day and just lift the honey off without any bees in them.
Mm-hmm. Now, it's interesting for people who are overseas, an ideal box is sort of like a half of a full-depth Langstroth. It's a little bit more than half. And what's interesting is in Tasmania, everyone only uses them. They use them for the brood, they use them for the supers, everything. That's a really interesting thing about Tasmania. Do you do that as well, Leigh? Yes.
All the equipment I've got is ideal. I know a lot of beekeepers in Tasmania have gone into a full depth for a brood box, but if you've got the one size frame, you can interchange your equipment fairly easily without sort of any bother. So the ideal box, yes, it is a little bit deeper than a half depth, and of course when you work with those, if you're carrying those back and forth or onto the vehicle and then to the honey room at any stage, an ideal box is full of honey is quite enough to carry, let alone a full depth one. I pity the commercial beekeepers on the mainland. They're all full depth, aren't they, really? But yes,
mostly,
Yes. So we use them for honey supers as well as brood boxes as well.
I thought about 5 years ago changing over solely to ideals, and I was a bit worried about how difficult it would be to find the queen, because most of my business is queen raising. And what do you think about that?
Yes, I think you're right there, because you can find a queen easier on a full depth comb than you can an ideal comb, because they tend to run from one side to the other, and of course you can miss them quite easily. When I'm looking for queens in the early spring, the swarms are not all that big, and of course you can find them fairly easy. And mostly she's on the brood as well at that time of the year. So yes, you can miss them quite easily in an ideal, whereas a full depth has that advantage of finding them pretty quickly.
Now, we were just talking earlier, you were just getting ready to charter your chopper pilot to take the hives into the Leatherwood.
You're out of my range, I'm afraid.
But it is true. Some people do it, don't they?
Oh, yes. Where forestry bridges have rotted out and beekeepers want to get to an exceptional leatherwood site, they will fly them in on pallets, but I wouldn't like to pay the expense it costs to actually do that. But it looks a bit scary when you see 4 boxes on a pallet hanging beneath a helicopter. Yeah,
imagine. I've seen a few videos. Very funny. All right. Well, thanks a lot for being with us today, Leigh. Really appreciate it. A great story. And once again, thanks so much for all you've done there. And hope that it continues into the future. And hopefully I can get down there and check them out one day.
Oh, be nice if you could, Brent. Yeah. So, as I said, if you can save me a copy of the interview, that'd be lovely.
Yeah, no worries. Well, once again, thanks for coming on, and we'll talk again soon.
My pleasure, Brent. Thank you.